Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Groundwork Podcast. I am your host, Kate Kavanaugh. I am Kate Kavanaugh. Our guest today really brought me home to myself, and I think one of the reasons that I am so passionate about recording this podcast and sharing these conversations and these stories with you is because I'm passionate in seeking these stories out. And I think that a lot of what I do through the lens of this podcast is selfish. It's for me. It's because I see people and I have this almost sense of desperation to better understand how they tick and to uncover a little part of their journey in an idea that I might better understand my own sense of humanity through that lens, and that I might be able to, as our guest today so elegantly put it, come home to myself. And producing this podcast has been the biggest homecoming I have had to myself in many, many years. And as we embark on episode 20 today, I am struck at the passion and the resonance I feel in doing this work. And so I really feel like this was a benchmark for me, that diving into the world of podcasting, I didn't know exactly how I would find this work to be and what passion I might find here, or how I would feel, or if I'd want to continue. And here we are at episode 20, and I have about 8 more interviews on the books for just July alone, and I have just experienced the biggest homecoming, and I think that homecoming has been built in all of these little failures that, as a perfectionist, being a podcast host, there is no way to learn except on the job. I can listen to podcast hosts and glean some information about the way that they show up for their podcasts. I can read articles. I can work on my interviewing skills when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm at the dentist, with people that I don't know very well. But ultimately, I am here learning how to do this on stage and making mistakes and failing in real time. And it has been a really long time since I have allowed myself to exist in a place where I could make mistakes. And made a couple of really big mistakes a number of years ago, and I think I shut myself away from the world for fear that I might make more. And doing this and putting myself out here in this way has laid me bare. I feel entirely naked, having gone through the fire, and I feel so proud of myself to be here. And when I sought out this conversation with Lacey Jean, who you might better know as Fireheart Shepherdess on Instagram, I saw in her the most beautiful sense of capability and of exploring the breadth of her own skills, and this this knowledge of her internal landscape in a way that, and an ability to articulate it. And I can't tell you, this woman's words are so beautiful, and I quoted her back to herself so much in this interview because her words have led me back to myself in those moments when you hop on this app that I know that we all have a sort of fraught push and pull relationship with, and to see them and to be immediately drawn in to a sense of exploration and connection, both with myself, with my land, and with this other human, 3,500 miles away. And so it was such a pleasure to finally get to have a real life conversation with her after many years of going back and forth a little bit on Instagram. And let me tell you, she is even more stunning in real time than she is online, and that's saying something. I wanted to share, I collected all these quotes from Lacey as I prepared for this conversation, and there was one that I didn't get to share, and I think it's perfect. It's perfect that there was only one left and that this is the one that was left. So I'm going to share it with you. What does the natural world do when she has been ripped open by earthquakes, stripped bare by flood, and scarred by fire? She sends her hardiest, her most daring, and even to these pioneers, she graces them with beauty. I'm just gonna let that sit. I'm not gonna commentate on it. And one of the things I do want to say is that in all of Lacey's incredible skill building, which you can watch her build a house in real time on Instagram this summer, she is offering to help us find these, what I have come to think of as skills of sovereignty. And when I think of skills of sovereignty, these are the skills that allow us to come back to our own sense of agency and self-ownership, to build within ourselves an idea that we are capable. And I think a lot of us have found these in a return to the land, or, if you're listening to this from a city, in just getting to know the rhythms of where you are. And so in these skills of sovereignty, the next big skill that has been on my list to learn has been how to tan hides. And as a butcher and as someone that raises my own meat, this is a part of the life cycle that I would really like to add to my repertoire. And one of the things that I'm gifting myself with this summer is Lacey's online hide tanning course. And one of the reasons that I'm drawn to Lacey's work in this sphere in particular is because it is still a connected space. It is not just one of these disembodied courses. There is still some connection with other members within this private Instagram page. There are live sessions. There is the opportunity to ask questions and to just be a part of a community of people that are also really interested in building these skills of sovereignty, as it were. And so while I think Lacey is not one for shameless self-promotion, let me shamelessly self-promote her here, in that I think that this is a wonderful way to support her, not just her work in the world, but also her words in the world. And that is something that her words have given me heart so many times over. And so this feels like a way to connect with her. And if hide tanning has been on your list, or it's something that you're really curious about, or you want to step into what we'll talk about, this next cycle in the life-death cycle, this cycle of comfort and warmth and softness off our land, then I hope that you will join me in purchasing her course, which I have a link to in my bio. I have a link to in the show notes. And yeah, I just know that you're going to find so much wisdom, so much depth, so much connection, and a real act of coming home contained in this podcast. And so without further ado,
I'm out and realizing, like, why do I want that? Do I want that because I saw it on Pinterest? Or because I saw it in somebody else's house and that worked for them? And so, like, actually getting into my head and figuring out a space that functionally and aesthetically really suited me has been, it's been a special season. I want to say magic, but sometimes magic feels like it just happened to you and it's something different. So
This is magic that you've worked for, and I mean toiled, blood, sweat, and tears for. And I think that that's a different kind of magic altogether, the kind that you build yourself. This didn't just come together, and I think that's been the most hypnotic thing about watching you build this, is watching it come together piece by piece in your vision and what suits you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Butter's gonna be in the background, giving us all sorts of like little spice.
I love these butter noises.
Right.
Been having I had a little morning of pounding out concrete and moving
Oh,
rocks.
good job. That's a good way to start.
That was my gratitude practice.
Do you start with breakfast always first, or do you get outside and do some stuff before you eat?
We usually go outside and do a little bit before we eat. We usually like to kind of get chores done, and especially on the weekends, we like to sort of linger over breakfast a little bit, make it where it's not just this functional in and out meal, but that we actually sit and spend some time together. And so we usually run outside to do chores prior to breakfast, and this morning just
good.
Got the house cleaned up a little bit to set us up for the weekend. I'm so excited to
figure out where everything goes in my space. That's been a whole nother ball of wax, because I'm having to create the storage solutions. There's no corners in a circle. So it's hard to find like storage spots. So I'm like creating closets and bookshelves, or like actually I want to build some bookshelves that actually fit the walls, because it's not as easy to tuck things in everywhere. So and I'm getting rid of a lot of stuff, and that feels good.
Oh, that always feels good. That is I think that's one of the most cleansing things. I have to ask, what is it like living in the round? I know it's new, but I feel like this is such a different, I feel like our living spaces really inform our perspective on life. And most of us have spent so much time living in 90-degree angles.
I think that we don't even notice the difference that a space can make on our mood unless we try to be aware of it or notice how different we feel in different spaces. And 20 years ago, I went to an event where they had a yurt set up as a display. And I walked in and I was like, this is it. I'm going to live in a space like this someday. And I considered yurts. I considered doing like a cob and straw bale structure that I would build myself, or like one of the earth bag structures. And when it finally came down to being able to set up a space, my landmates, actually, the people that offered me the space on their land, they suggested the dome, and at first I wasn't super sold on the whole package of it. Like, there's something about a yurt that felt a little bit more romantic, but when I started looking into like the structural safety of the domes, the height, the ceiling height inside, all of the things that I could do within the space, I can design. The company I worked with, I could design where all the windows go, and insulating packages, and the whole 9 yards. And so it became more and more appealing to me. And now that I'm in this space, I don't want to go back. Somebody asked me the other day what I would do with $1 million, and I was like, I wouldn't buy a new home. I love this space. It's tiny and it suits me. It's tiny, but it doesn't feel tiny, and that's.
No, and it has those ceilings that look like they're 20 plus feet
is that right?
tall,
16.
And so
it's 16 foot in the center, and I think that having this large window and the window up top and the little porthole windows all over the place, I feel like I'm outside even when I'm inside, and that's all I've ever wanted in my home, is to still feel connected to the light outside, to feel connected to the weather, to the rain. Somebody asked me about the noise. They said, is it magnified? Is the rain magnified? And I was like, I don't think it's magnified, but I want to hear. I want to hear the changing weather outside. I want to hear the rain and the wind and the birds.
I want all of those things too. I think a lot of our separation from nature actually comes
I
from
think you're right.
the way that we build our houses to be in perpetual summer, you know, that it's cool in the summer and it's warm in the winter, and we have all of these walls. I notice as I drive through town and places that I'll see everybody with their curtains closed, that we're shutting out all of the light. And I think that that really perpetuates this idea of separateness and the idea of living in a space that magnifies
You're so
and
right.
really
I
dives
read a
into
book
that connection.
15 years back,
I think that
Radical
sounds amazing.
Homemaker. Have you read that one? By Shannon Hayes. And she was talking about
I
the
haven't.
homes that we build in, current times, and how separate everything is. You know, we all have our own rooms, and the kitchen is separate from the living space. Everything is compartmentalized, which I think is very similar to the way that many of us structure our days too. It's like, this is the gym, and this is work, and this is play, and this is, it's like everything's separate. And she mentioned how important it is to have your home needs to be this creative living organism where you feel safe to be productive and to play and to flow and to have community within the walls with your family. And that just was such a light bulb moment for me. It just really struck a chord where I started to shift my entire vision for what I was working towards. It's like, I want everything to flow together. I want my work, my play, I want it all to be interconnected. I want my family to be part of the work. I want us to have a common goal, a common mission, a common adventure that we're on together. And so the home is part of that. The way you structure your home, it can be to your benefit, to make what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just the flow of it. I'm losing myself.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love this idea of really having what you want for your life, that purpose, that mission, that the end of compartmentalization and reductionism almost, right? That the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that there's this tendency to want to compartmentalize, and I really see that reflected in the way that we build houses as soon as you said it. But also, and I want to come back to this idea of how we build our lives, that there's a separate component for everything, that the gym lives here and work lives here and play lives here. And you hit on something that has been a real goal of mine, which is to build all of that in together, that is all just one sort of continuous state of flow, that my physical labor and my work and my play are all, at least, I'm not going to say I've made it there, but they are they are working towards a path of convergence.
I agree in that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to know how you built. I think you really exemplify that. No, I just think that you exemplify that, and I want to know how you built it.
Yeah, so for a while back in my early 20s, I was very passionate about health, nutrition, body mechanics. In high school, I was on a path to pursue sports medicine. I ended up in the personal training realm, and while there are certainly parts of that I still really enjoy learning about and pursuing, it felt very separate to me. This idea that we reserve the time we move our body for the gym or for this hour at home with our workout equipment, or we pack up to go somewhere to hike, which is something I do. You know, it's not like I don't mean it in the way that I don't think that people should get out and do intentional physical labor, but something felt disconnected for me. I wanted my work and my play to overlap. I wanted my daily rhythm and flow to all be connected, to all be related. If I was going to be training in the gym for something, I wanted to know why. What am I training for in my daily life? How does this machine correlate to what I'm doing each day? And so that sort of led me to this idea that, wow, instead of this machine, I bet if I chopped wood, I could get I could get this same exercise and also have wood to burn. And then I thought, wow, instead of being hide tanning sort of was appealing to me for that same reason, because I was like, wow, it's physical labor with an end product, not just my own body being the end product, but there's also this piece of art at the end of the workout. And I love efficiency. I love when I can both get those endorphins from a workout and something productive out of it. So it was sort of I don't know that I went about it in a very
there's something amazing about not having about wanting the toils of your labor to bear fruit, right? And to have that be true of life. And I think about that when I'm carrying buckets of feed out to the animals every day. And I think about this idea of a farmer's carry at the gym. I've got two,
I think I had that exact
two 5-gallon buckets.
I was listening for rings, and it was more like being a ninja. Like we were just like on the floor playing, basically. Just doing very functional training, full body movement stuff. There was no machines. But one of the things that we did consistently was farmer carries, and I was just laughed to myself thinking, like, I'm paying money. I'm paying somebody to give me buckets full of
to tell me to do this
or whatever to walk across the gym. Like, I could be doing this at home and building a fence and clearing a pasture or something, and that gave me pause. Yes,
or literally just moving rocks at home, as
and
were the case this morning for me. Could just move my own rocks with purpose.
Not everybody has the land. They're not everybody's living in a space where they can go outside and start building fence or tan in a sheep hide or something. But I think that there's a lot of joy that comes from some sort of activity. But that's why activity that results in an end product, at least for myself. I can't speak for everyone. All to intermesh. I wanted to get up in the morning. I wanted to be able to walk outside, do a little bit of work, stop, come in, have my breakfast, and kind of go in this. I sort of like walk in a circle throughout my days. It's like I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, come back in, grab a little bite to eat, get back outside, and I keep this flow going, and it helps me not get bored. I'm very easily I get distracted and I get a little bit bored. I have always had a really hard time in a workplace with walls and like a very rigid schedule.
Me too.
And somebody telling me what to do.
I mean, that's the real kicker for me.
It is. Oh, sometimes it's like I was gonna do that until you told me to.
Yeah, and that took the wind out of my sails. Telling me to do it. It makes me very unemployable.
I know. I hear you. Whenever I think about like what it would be like to go back into the workforce, I feel like a caged animal a little bit. I'm like, oh, it'd be like putting a raccoon in a petting zoo or something, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. I've gotten too feral.
Yeah, well, I'm way too feral at this point. You touched on something I want to come back to, because this has actually been something I've been struggling with lately, which is this idea of having this circular day. And it's funny because as I was prepping for this, so much of looking at your work, I just kept coming back to this idea of roundness and to cycles, and I love that is what you evoked in this. I mean, I have all these notes, and so much of there's a whole section of cycles and roundness. And I've been struggling with how to build a day as somebody that wears a lot of hats. And I think that this is kind of the nature of farming in a lot of ways, that we have so many hats. And I think especially when we're integrating all the hats, right? Like they all fit together. All of these pieces of the pie, however you want to visualize it, they all fit together. But it can be hard to figure out how it fits into a day or into a week. And building structure without propagating overwhelm.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I'm just really resonating with that because this season of my life, the mantra has been do less, better. I have my circles, my cycles have been more like a tornado in the past. It's sort of like, you know, I barely touch ground everywhere I go, and I'm kind of creating chaos around whatever I'm doing, including my own family. I have been a little bit of a source of like being wound tight and high strung, and in this current season, I've had to sit with that, acknowledge it. It's been very humbling, and also seeing how, you know, there's a phrase that says like, slow down to speed up, and the idea that by taking more time, by slowing down, by not trying to do it all, I'm actually going to save myself time. I'm going to do things better the first time around. I'm going to do it well. I'm going to think it through a little bit better, and hopefully that means I don't have to revisit it 5 more times in the day, or, you know, fix it later, or, you know, deal with the mess that I created as I was fixing this thing over here, or working. And that is very counterintuitive to me, to slow down, to be more thoughtful, to like actually take notes, to write down things that are the priority for the day. Like today, I would really like to get this one thing done. And that's the other thing, is like narrowing it down to, rather than how many things can I fit in this day, to let's start with one or two. 1 or 2 things that are very important to me. That one fence has to be fixed because it's for the safety of my flock or whatever, which I'm talking a little bit hypothetically, because right now I don't even have a flock, which is part of this whole current season of stepping back and knowing my limitations, which I even hate to admit I have any, but I have a lot. I have a lot of limitations. And in building my house currently and trying to get settled into this space, I recognize that I cannot also care for a flock well. I could do it, but I wouldn't do it well. And so for the health and well-being of the to do that well, and the animals that were in my care, I decided that this is not the season for me to my deck, and I can picture where the sheep are going to be someday, but how awesome is it going to be?
I feel like that's the metaphor, right? To build the fence first,
you know, like
and
have
to
a
then
good
fill
fence.
it. And I think that sometimes in our rush to get there, right, to get to this end goal that doesn't even exist. There is no, I mean, it's just something that's evolving and changing and shifting. So there isn't this static end goal, but to build it first and to then let it be filled. And
to let it not force things. I think that when we slow down, it's I can't remember who wrote it. It might have been John Muir. about how he doesn't prefer hiking as much as he wants to meander.
I can find it.
And that might have been Thoreau, it might have been Wendell-Berry, I'm not entirely sure, but but I love that idea that a hike feels like a goal sometimes. It feels like I'm going to get to this top. I'm going to, I'm trudging through so I can look at this view. A meander is what even is the goal. And that's so more about the entire journey, building the fence, and why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we getting these animals? What is the purpose, and how does it add to our days? I think a lot of folks, myself included, we have this sort of lofty idea of like, I want to just be able to do all the things. I want to be the source. I want to have the knowledge. I want to have the skills. I want to be where people come to get the stuff. But we forget about, what is it supposed to add to your own day? What about it do you love? Guess what? I don't love chickens. I started out with chickens, and it felt like a failure when I realized, like, I don't actually love chickens. I don't like processing chickens. I like to eat a chicken once in a while, but I don't eat chickens that often. They get into everything. They're very hard to keep in. I don't necessarily love the way they fit into the flow of my day. And so to let that go at first felt like, oh, I've done something wrong, or there's something in my head I need to fix. And then I realized, like, this is my life, though. I get to pick what brings, what I'm adding to my table or allowing into my space. All of this was a choice in the first place to live this way. So it's okay if you want to.
I'm there right now, and I think that we have this habit of getting really attached to our choices because we made them, without leaving space for adapting to where we are in whatever season we're in. I know my husband and I right now are thinking about, do we really enjoy the big pigs? We have big pigs and little pigs. We have Coonies and Berkshires, and they're very, very different experience. And do we enjoy the big pigs? Is this adding, or is this taking away?
What's been one of the biggest challenges with the big pigs in particular? I'm very curious because I've never been one.
They're destructive, and to do them right requires an amount of labor that I do not, in this season of my life, want to put in. The amount of fencing and rotating them and moving them and keeping them in fences, keeping piglets in any sort of fencing structure is just more of my day than I want to give to this particular aspect. And I think there is also a consideration of inputs. Too many inputs. I love ruminants because they live off the land. Yeah.
Grass.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get the right the great rotational grazing going, and make sure there's proper irrigation or whatever, and you've got it made. So, can I read something that I just read this morning? It goes along with what we're saying. This is a Mary Oliver quote. It's called Lines Written in the Days of Growing Darkness. Every year we have been witness to it, how the world descends into a rich mash, in order that it may resume. And therefore, who would cry out to the petals on the ground to stay, knowing as we must how the
You're doing great.
vivacity of what was is married to the vitality of what will be. I don't say it's easy, but what else will we do if the love one claims to have for the world be true? So let us go on, cheerfully enough, this and every crisping day, though the sun be swinging east and the ponds be cold and black and the sweets of the year be doomed. And I have been thinking about that lately, about how our need to hold on to something, whether it's our work, what we do, what our title is, which is one of the reasons why when you asked, what do I do, or how do I describe myself in the bio for this? I've always started off with, my title as what I do currently, but that continues to change, and each time it has to change, I have to go through this kind of season of mourning of who I was or who I thought I was. And this season has been the season of like grasping onto my name, who I am. I'm me, and I get to do whatever I want tomorrow. And today, this is what I'm going to do, but it doesn't have to be what I do forever. Raising sheep, being a self-proclaimed shepherdess, which is sort of a lofty title, considering I'm not like moving sheep up the hills or anything. I just usually have a smaller flock, but that title continues to shift and change. And I'm excited. I'm excited for all the ways, all the different hats that I'll get to wear in this life. And I get to bring myself to each of those experiences and new titles.
You were so purposeful with your language there, and you said, I get to bring myself. I get to, right? Like that it's an honor to bring myself into all of these iterations. And I want to read what you wrote as your title, which is I'm Lacey Jean. That's the only constant thing I am and have been and will be. And I think that's perfect, because I think that we do get attached to our work and the identity that's wrapped up in doing that work. And I recently read, and I'm probably going to butcher this quote by Emma Lume, and it said, I've attended 1,000 funerals this year, and all of them have been my own. And
yes, that gives me shivers.
Like we have to let it die.
But
we have to let go. Go ahead.
No, I really enjoy what you added to that thought, because it's true. That idea of showing up to our own funerals. It requires a certain amount of courage to watch, to observe, to hold what we thought we were, and to know that we're going to get back up tomorrow. Yes. And we get to reinvent. We get to be whatever we want to be tomorrow. And we get to bring with the experiences. And even within those experiences, we can pick and choose what we want to hold on to from the experiences. As far as like if there was like some negativity or ego wrapped up in it, we can admire it and look at it in a different way. It doesn't always have to bring us shame. It doesn't always have to bring us the same pat on the back that we need or crave. Instead, we can just observe it and be like, that's something I got to do. I got to experience that. That was that's helping me walk into this next phase. So
death
is
death in all of its iterations. Death in 1,000 ways that
Absolutely.
We experience it at such a tangible and intangible level.
I loved one of the ways that we've connected through Instagram is kind of our awe, the way that we are students and bearers, and I'm not finding the right word for it, but just our relationship with death. One of the things that you and I have sent each other is pictures of things that we've found that died. Which sounds morbid and crazy, but let me explain. One of the things that we talked about was how, as children, we sort of had a fascination with death. I used to carry around like a little Kodiak Polaroid or a Kodiak disposable camera, and my mother would take it in and get it developed, and she'd be looking through the pictures, and she's like, what is wrong with you? Because there would be multiple pictures of, like roadkill or an animal that I found that was like halfway through decomposition, or I would enjoy seeing how like the moss was growing through a skeleton. And I was fascinated by it because we're so removed from it. You don't see it anywhere in our daily life, for the most part. So when I would come across it, I wanted to remember it. I wanted to think about it.
We talked about this. In my late teen years, did a whole photography project of roadkill, and just was hypnotized by death. And I mean, even as a small child, and I know I've said this on the podcast, my mom would catch me watching the scene where Bambi's mom gets shot over and over again, just trying to comprehend something that felt hidden. And I think death feels very hidden, and I know that I feel some strange calling to be with death, to walk with death in some experience in this life. And I think it's come through as wanting to be a butcher, and then wanting to farm and process and slaughter all of my own animals, and just seeking it in the forest. And I was laughing because I found a vertebrae the other day that was covered in moss and lichen coming all in out of the cortical bone tissue, and I was just in awe of how that could even happen.
But that's the key right there, is that we, maybe not everybody, but I think that for the vast majority, we see death as this end, and it's scary, and a lot of us are afraid of what the end means. But if we look around ourselves, even in the metaphor that we're talking about of the 1,000 deaths within ourselves, death births something new. That poem I just read by Mary Oliver, if we didn't want the petals to fall and deteriorate and go away, what would that mean for the next season? Like, we have to have death. There has to be that cycle. And it's one of the reasons I ended up in the work I do as well. Hide tanning is taking something that is decomposing, that's going back to a new form, and I'm preserving it. I'm giving it a new life. I'm making it something beautiful and functional, and warm out of a death. And the same with meat and butchery, is I'm transforming. I often think of myself as like this steward, an usher. I'm taking it from, well, that sounds like I'm giving myself a very again, lofty title, but it's more like I have to hold on to the sacredness and the ritual aspect of it, or the sacrament, so that it doesn't just become this sort of like calloused act.
I was thinking about that with your work. I know that we share being a butcher, but this aspect of hide tanning, as I was thinking about what it added to the cycle, it almost changed the cycle completely. I so often think of the life and death cycle as death being the part where one becomes many. This is an idea I've been toying with. Like, death is a space where one becomes many. Whether that's the nutrition that we take in from a sheep that we've raised, from a lamb and then processed and is now in our freezer, or it's just the cycle in nature of, if a fox dies in the woods and that carcass decomposes and its bones become phosphorus in the soil, which become nutrients for plants, which become nutrients for deer. And and all of those things. But then to add this aspect of the hide tanning, it's almost like there's this little cycle, and then you break free into this new, bigger cycle outside of it, where this becomes a part of comfort and warmth and softness and just really really life. And I have all these Lacey quotes in here. You'll probably hate me for this. I pulled all these Lacey quotes as I was prepping this. And one of them that you said, and I love this: what a gift to be a part of death that has so much meaning and reverence. To look at death is to turn up the dial on life.
I mean, I'm shaking my head because I remember what I was feeling when I wrote that. And it never fails for me to be, so one of my favorite aspects of the job, which is going to sound really morbid, is the slaughter part, because I show up, I do mobile slaughter, I show up on site, and I get to experience the space where the animal raiser, the farmer, the shepherd is there, and usually because I'm dealing with smaller farms, there's some mourning that's happening, or they want to kind of talk it through, and I then get to be in this beautiful setting where the animal had lived its whole life, and walk that line from the moment that it goes from being a life to what you were just saying, like it's this process now of being multiple lives. I'm going to take this animal and feed other people. The blood that's spilling is feeding the soil that it lived on, and the bugs, and usually the intestines get buried on site in the farmer's compost bin, and then I get to take the hide and the head, usually, to clean the skull. And that to me feels like it's like my art. I think everybody needs to have art in their lives, like, or it sort of is what happens when you know that you're not just in survival mode, right? Like when you're not just worried about like your shelter and eating and being clothed, you have space to be creative, to be an artist in some fashion. And I do love to write, I love to paint, but that physical, to put my own sweat and toil and that goes into a hide. I get talking about earlier about like meshing those things together. It doesn't get old. I've thought many times about trying to make the process a little bit easier on myself, maybe not doing everything quite as traditionally and slow, but I would lose something. Because it's been a part of my therapy and my transformation and my healing and my growth is to pour myself into my artwork in that way. So you're right. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a whole new level of
bringing in, of ushering in new life. Yeah. I was really struck by one of your posts where the woman had eaten the mutton chops the day that she gave birth to her child, which she had given birth to on this beautiful rugs of, and one of which being one of your sheepskins, that these really get incorporated into all of the most tender moments of life. Those times when we want warmth or comfort. Like, I think that there is so much vulnerability in the space that a soft place to land gives us, and how much life is fostered in those quiet moments. And for me, the idea of a sheepskin and how we use sheepskins here in our house, that they bear witness to the most precious and tender moments of our life, and to have that connect back into this full life cycle, it feels like something other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is something other. And I was just having a discussion with a friend the other day about how or the different poetry and philosophy that we find ourselves drawn to. And I was mentioning how I often can I enjoy kind of like the whimsical sort of ethereal, cerebral, whatever stuff sometimes, but I want something that, what I really crave is people that put a piece that we can't quite label, that happens kind of awareness. It's the those moments like giving birth to your child on a sheepskin that somebody tanned by hand, or eating a mutton chop that has only just been barely salted. One of my favorites for that reason, extra level of enjoyment, and a little bit of a little bit of a romantic twist on just the daily grind, and that's the way I think in my head, is I have to like walk around and sort of give everything a little bit of a story and a little bit of a I guess I talk through those moments of like, why does this feel so special? Why is this moment where I'm washing dishes and a butterfly like landed on the bush right in front of me? Why does this feel otherworldly and like I could write a poem about
I
it?
love that, and I think it's. I like this idea of the act of thinking through the feeling of why it feels so special. I think we are so programmed to think through the feeling of why something feels so hard or so terrible, but we don't often sit and really embrace those moments that feel special. And I think they often feel special because they're moments in which we feel more connected. And it's an open-ended type of connection, connected to something. And I feel, yeah.
I think it's when we're most in our bodies. It's like we're most in the feeling of like what it feels like to be in our skin in this particular place, and this taste in our mouth, or this feeling on our hands. We're not so much in our heads.
I like that.
Which is a funny thing to say, but I've been thinking about it a lot, about not being so much in my head, and more in my body and experiencing life by feeling it and through my own lens and perspective, because we're so in in the digital world, we're so in other people's perceptions of things, we're so in the idea of getting feedback, that I think that we stop feeling it for ourselves because we're waiting for somebody else to tell us how it should feel, instead of being like, wow, I'm here right now, I'm experiencing this, I'm feeling this, and these are my...
To participate in an internal feedback loop instead of an externalized feedback loop, that it's an internal feedback loop between our own brains, our own bodies, our own nervous systems, and our own environment, instead of looking for this aspect of externality that's going to give us validation or give us this other perspective other than our own, which somehow feels easier. I just was really struck by that, and how the digital world has interrupted that internal feedback loop.
It's true, and I notice when I'm feeling my most anxious and out of sorts, it's usually because I'm not in my body anymore. I'm not experiencing my life. Even the negative things, I'm not sitting with them. I'm not asking them what they're trying to teach me, what they're trying to show me, what they're trying to protect me from. I'm looking for somebody else out there, or some experience to regulate me, and learning how to be my home first, as in me, not any space or any place, is learning how to come home to myself, and be secure in my own body and my own mind. That's been building my home has actually been a huge metaphor for all of that. It has been this idea of coming home to myself. I am home. Not in this space, but in me. And it changes the way that I have been interacting with social media, with even my friends and my social groups, is I'm not feeling quite as drained anymore, because I'm not sort of like this open vessel where I'm just allowing things to come in and out. Instead, I'm kind of holding it and being like, this is what I'm allowing out, this is what I'm allowing in. It feels so
Do you think, I think so often some of my curiosity that leads me into these interviews are people who are living life through a lens that I find so beautiful and so inspiring, and you exemplify that to me. And I think getting to read through your Instagram as if it were a book, as I prepared for this over the last week. You know, I think so often we get these little bites of people, but to actually spend time immersed in your words and the way that you view life, and right there with something so magical. As somebody who I really work on having leakiness, I call it leaky. I have leaky boundaries. I don't always know how to keep me here home. I loved that building your home has even deepened that connection, that you are home. It isn't, again, it's nothing external. It is a space within us that we can foster and come home to. And it's not easy. It's not easy to build. I think this is part compliment and part query of how you built it, because it is not easy to build that space where you have, I love that noise. It's my favorite sound in the world. That like train. Is that a train? Yeah. Yeah, this is my dad
I wondered
loved
if
trains.
you were going to be able to hear the train.
Rode on every train
it goes
in
by
Colorado.
several times a day.
I love it. Oh, you have to ride on a train. I mean, in third grade, I thought I was going to be a train engineer. This was like
That's
my
so
life's
cool.
dream.
I've never
to be a train
ridden
engineer.
On a train.
And so I've never lived somewhere where I couldn't hear a train until now.
Really?
And as we're talking about, I mean,
this.
train sounds like home to me. Just as we're talking about home.
Oh, that's so sweet. I have grown fond of it. At first, it felt very jarring to me, but we were talking a little bit yesterday about like kind of accepting the thorns in life and not just acknowledging them and being like, well, that hurts, but instead like accepting like this is part of the rose. So I'm learning how to love it and be like, this is part of my environment.
Trying to love it. I think this is trying to love the tough stuff and making that decision that it's a choice. We get a choice.
To love it.
I mean, not always, but I think that there are many things in life where we can choose to embrace aspects. Never all of them. I don't want to bypass anybody in this, but choose to embrace difficult aspects and to let them become part of home, to let these thorns become
Yeah, you were kind of alluding to that question before our train guest about building home, and I think it goes hand in hand with the accepting of the thorns a little bit, because I think there are certain things that I felt were security outside of myself. There are certain parts of my life that felt like this is home, and as long as this is here, I'm home, I'm safe, I'm fine. And going through seasons of life where those things were not there anymore, or it changed, the rules kind of changed, or even environment, having an idea of where home was going to be forever as a physical place, and having to leave that. It rocked my world. I felt empty. I felt like I had absolutely nothing left. And I realized that in order to rebuild, before I was able to rebuild my life or create this new home, I was going to have to figure out how to be okay in case it happened again. Because there was part of me that thought, if this happens again, I'm not going to make it. Like, I felt like I barely made it out of this experience. How am I going to make it through the next one? Because it will happen. These things happen. Death, relationships change, work changes, we have health issues, whatever it is. There are these things looming out there that will happen. And so I was sort of forced to have a period of time where I really didn't have a whole lot of work to do. I didn't really have a home. I was kind of bouncing around. My sons and I even lived in a canvas tent in a field for a summer, which was equal parts very hard and very special, very, very special and very sweet. I really enjoyed that experience, but I had to decide that I could take myself wherever I went, and that I would be okay, which is not to dismiss the hard things at all, but rather to acknowledge them, to acknowledge that that is part of this life, that to have the rose, you have the thorns, to expect them, and to know that I'm strong enough and I'm brave.
You
enough
wrote two
to
things, and
keep going.
I have another Lacey quote here, that's allowing seasons of hardship and challenge the opportunity to build our muscle of courage and resilience. And I think that really resonated with me, in addition to this idea, and you had written it in a post about embracing the what ifs, and not the fear, but that there are also the what ifs of possibility. That it's not just the, well, what if the worst happens? And as a self-proclaimed catastrophizer, I'm quick to catastrophize. That is something that I have been working on, is building, well, what if something beautiful happens? And what if the worst happens and something beautiful comes out of it? Absolutely. I think that, again, it kind of goes back to death, being afraid of ends. When we do everything we can to avoid ends, things ending, we keep ourselves from experiencing the depth of the what is and the what ifs, to really, really throw ourselves into what is right now. Even the animals that we get to raise, the is right now is going out into the pasture and seeing them full of all of their life and pigginess and sheepiness, and doing what they do out there, embracing that, not because we know there's an end, but just because that is what is right now. Because our lives are also, I mean, that's the only for sure thing, is that there's going to be an end. And to live in fear of that instead of, no, I like that, because you came back to this other idea of that death turns up the dial on life. It turns up on the dial on what is. And I really like this exchanging, this idea of exchanging what is in place of what if, instead of asking what if, asking what is. And I think that's such a beautiful reframe. And I was also, do it. No, go for it. I want to hear.
Isn't it amazing how, go ahead. No, I want to hear what you're saying. Well, I was just going to say, isn't it amazing how much time we spend imagining the what ifs? How much energy in the day is spent preparing for all the ways something could go wrong, in our relationships, in our work, in the way that we approach a project. It's always about what if this happens, which is not to say you don't build in security measures. It's not like you're going to build a house without thinking about the wind and the storms that are coming, but to build it just out of fear, regardless of what that is. When we build things out of fear, when we build ourselves and our minds around fear, we experience life so much differently. We're still going to experience it the same way, the same things are going to happen most likely, but we're changing the lens from how it's impacting us.
It is, and I've lived that way. I say that as somebody who has lived that way, and who has actively had to put in work to change that lens, to get out of that mindset. And then this is something that we had talked about, is how much mindset matters. And your words matter, not just that you say to others, but that internalized dialogue and how that is framed makes a difference on how
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it starts there. Even the words that we say to other people are usually a reflection of the words that we're saying to ourselves. Um, and it's a practice. I think you said something just a few minutes ago. It is work. It led me to this thought that it is work and training to change that pattern of thought. And we don't even know we're doing it. You know, we can kind of get ourselves into a frenzy of anxiety over a circumstance that hasn't happened, and to stop ourselves and to say, why am I allowing myself to go to this place? Why? What benefit is there? And it's because it's a pattern that we've built because it gave us a solution that felt good at one point. You know, for some reason we felt like it saved us from something. But that's not usually serving us well to move forward towards the life that we want to build, to live in that state. So to practice, it doesn't feel comfortable to stop ourselves. It feels a little bit like taking off the parachute and being like, I don't know if I can jump out of this plane without that parachute. That's so scary. I've never done that before. So it takes time before it starts to feel normal to stop yourself when you start that pattern of thinking. And I cannot believe the change in my inner peace, like the calm that I have felt. And I'm nowhere where I would like to be with that kind of thinking, but I think that just these small increments of change in my thought patterns have given me.
I agree. Yes.
They've changed the rules.
Freedom
for life,
and it's letting ways of being die. It's coming back again to this idea that you have to let it go. And
freedom.
I think that
that's what it is.
Is this aspect of you have to throw it. You have to throw at a funeral. It did serve you, right? And so you eulogize that this way of being, this lens of, in this case, looking at the world through fear. It served a purpose, and it came from really real experiences that were painful and they hurt, and at the time it was protective, but it has outlived its purpose, and it's time to put it in the ground and to let it become other lenses and other ways of being in this life.
Yeah, and what a better way to acknowledge the passing of seasons in our life than to use shame, as to be like, I don't want to be that person anymore. That's not who I am anymore. The old me was that way. And I think it's so important to be gentle. And to say thank you. I don't know who wrote the quote or put it up on social media, but something about like thanking our past selves for bringing us to where we are today. I love that idea because there are so many parts of myself that formerly would make me cringe and be like, oh, I can't believe I used to, that behavior or pattern used to be part of who I was. I'm so embarrassed for that person, and instead just be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That was so brave that you got through that, and now we're moving on.
Yes.
I think it's just a
and I think that
accepting way to move through life.
Again, it's that mindset shift,
other people
because once we have extended grace to ourselves, it becomes easier, or vice versa. I think some people work, in different ways. I think I was able to extend grace outward before I was able to accept it inward. But the more that I leaned into that outward sense of grace, the more it became internalized. And so I think that for different people, it can be one or the other, this act of moving inward or moving outward. But
yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I appreciate that you offered that perspective, because you're right. We are all going to, my experience in the way that I process and have flowed and
and I think that's
grown
I
through my
just want to go back
experiences,
to
it's gonna be
it's
my
so
own.
important
That's
that
not
we
gonna be
extend.
how
I think
everybody is
even
gonna do it. So
now more than ever, I have found in my
you're
life that
so right.
now is the time to extend grace outward and inward, and to build more bridges is something that I'm working on just in my own life instead of deepening divides. And I think that that's
Hugely.
a radical act right now, and something that, no, it matters to me. And I think that there's this mindset shift again to bring that back that really changes that.
Yeah, that is so hard because it forces us. Again, I think that it's a lot easier to do that when we're safe in our home, in ourselves. When we can extend more grace, we can be more open to somebody with a different perspective when we feel safe in our own minds and heads, and it doesn't feel threatening to us because we can listen. You can hold somebody else without feeling like you have to absorb it or like they're going to take something from you. And right now, I think is so important to be able to hold people and their perspectives and experiences and observe rather than be reactive to it. We've sort of lost. I backpedaling a little bit to some experiences I've had recently. My neighborhood, we gather for like potlucks and whatnot, and we also have been reaching out to some of the candidates that are going to be running for like the local offices because we want to get to know them a little bit better. We have a really small community out here. I've never been one for politics and government, and it's been really hard for me in many ways, but to put a face and a person with experiences and feelings and personality to these offices and to these candidates has been a huge shift for me, because it's so easy to have an opinion about somebody and why they have a certain bend politically, but to actually sit with people and hear their stories and their lives.
Yeah, and I don't like blue.
It gives you a broader perspective.
Yeah.
It's like you get to read their story a little bit. You're not just looking at the cover and going, I would never read that book because it's, bright shiny blue or whatever, or bright pink, or it doesn't matter. I'm really grateful for these experiences. I feel like I'm learning a lot about what you were just saying, just about giving grace, and part of that means that you have to be a little bit more vulnerable and open to hearing people's stories, and that's something that we're pretty closed off from currently with social media. We get to pick and choose what we bring in and who we surround ourselves, and we're not so involved with like our communities anymore. We're now judging people because they've got a certain bumper sticker or a flag or whatever they wrote in the bio of their social media,
and all of that brings us to the same table of being these flesh and blood suits with experiences and hunger and satiation. And I think that local politics in particular exemplify this, because it really does bring together the different fabric of a community. And I think if we think of the way that we curate our lives now as quilts, we're making quilts with very similar pieces of fabric. But when we dive into being a member of our community, where there is, and I mean this in a positive way, less choice in all of these fabric swatches that we're pulling, I think there's so much more aliveness and vibrancy and a chance for our own personal growth and love.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The opportunity for growth, to challenge my own thoughts, to sit with them, to observe them, and wonder, like, why do I feel this strongly? Why is this creating this super reactive response in me? Why am I feeling bristly about this? Is there a way that I can approach this that's more productive? Can I be can I love and give grace, and still hold my boundaries? I think so. Can I appreciate this person because their experiences have led them to their personal beliefs? Yes. And I like what you said about, like, we have less choice. And I think that even correlates to our food these days. Like, everything is a choice now. We get to choose whatever the heck we want all the time. We can eat whatever we want whenever we want, no matter what the season is. You know, we can have tacos this night, and then we can have curry and fish and lobster or whatever. You know, like, it's crazy the amount of choices. And I think that we sort of get lost in the choices, even. Like, we get almost a little bit overwhelmed. Like, I can have whatever I want all the time. And there's something about when we have some flavor in our life that we wouldn't particularly pick, you experience it so much differently. You appreciate the things that you really like even more. You even learn how to live with the things that maybe you don't necessarily like. I love that much.
And community. Food and community, and less choice. Less choice to be in the place that you're in and what it has to offer. That maybe
the aspect of your life.
Being here in upstate New York, having a banana in January, while it's a choice I could make, I could also just choose to be with what is here. And what is here is, you know, and I mean, there's meat in my freezer that I raised and that absorbed all of the summer sunshine from exactly where I am. And maybe there's some potatoes that I or a friend grew. I usually, growing vegetables is not my strong suit, and so we barter a lot for vegetables.
Same. Same.
What they need.
Yep. Vegetables don't tell me when they're hungry, and that's exactly. I need a little bit more back and forth completely. With my
and so not having that sense of choice, and you wrote something too, you know, this idea of building a new currency through resources and skills and through trade and barter. And I think that also kind of gives us this delicious limitation of choice.
Yes, I love that you use the word delicious, because I was just thinking, like, it adds an element of flavor and juiciness to life when you trade something that you toiled over. Like, I trade currently lamb for a gal that lives nearby raises chickens, and we already know my feelings on chickens. I don't love them. I don't want to raise them. I don't want to butcher them. I do like having chicken every once in a while, so I trade. And it's this awesome, beautiful exchange, because I know how much heart she put into it. She enjoys it. It's something her and her family do. They're really good at it. I love supporting someone that's really good at what they do. And likewise, she appreciates what I do. She loves the time and skill and effort that I've put into it. So to get to trade our efforts as opposed to using this outside currency that's sort of soulless in some ways, it feels even that much more special, because every time I eat some of that chicken, I think about how, in order for it to get to my plate, I went to a different farm and slaughtered a sheep and went through that whole process, and then I had this exchange with a friend that is, you know, she's now a friend because of this exchange that we've created with one another, and we talk back and forth about our systems and the ways that we're going to be doing things a little bit different. What did you like about the last round? do you want it packaged differently? This is the recipe I use. What's one of your favorite recipes? It's been so special. Like, you don't get that if I walked into a store and picked up a package of chicken. And I'm not saying that everybody has this opportunity to trade, but there are things that we can trade. And I think that when we tap into those and we're not afraid of the extra effort that goes into like finding those people and building a relationship around it, it adds something to life that you can't buy. And I am all for that. That's something I think I seek out, is experiences you can't buy.
And connections. To find connections at every corner is another thing that I'm always trying to build in, to have that aspect of connectivity that I just traded we trade meat with some of my favorite vegetable farmers in the world, and they're incredible, and they grow the most beautiful vegetables. And we traded some meat for this beautiful bag of like the sweetest carrots I've ever had. And you're right, every time I have them in my fridge in this big bag, and every time I pull one out, it's a connection to them, and it's a connection to their work and what they've built and what it means to trade knowledge and to trade passion too in those moments.
Passion. Oh, it's huge, because I don't necessarily love growing vegetables. I love growing flowers and some perennials, and I love an orchard of a few things. Mostly I like if it's somebody, I like my garden to be like a cat. I want to put out water once in a while. I want it to take care of itself, you know? So I love the things that can kind of take care of themselves, reseed, show back up next year kind of thing. But there are certain things that I really enjoy eating that I don't love putting in the effort to grow. And so when I find somebody that's really good at it, that's like passionate about it the way that I'm passionate about what I do, it tastes better. Because I don't also have this attachment to it of like, I didn't like growing this. This was a lot of work. I don't know if it was worth the effort. And instead I got to do something I really enjoyed doing, and I still got to have it. And that's so special. And I'm trying to find that more and more, like, clothing, artwork, tools. There are people that are so good at what they do, and they love it. And we live in a world right now where you have this choice to go buy it from a big box store, order it online.
It is. That was the word that came to my mind too.
I mean, this sounds crazy, but I mean, it's soulless in a lot of ways. And life is precious. It's so precious, and I don't mean to over romanticize it, but it's just, again, it's that whole like less but better idea. Like, we can get so wrapped up in this frenzy of having all the things for not a lot, or we can have the things that we really want and have stories and meaning attached to them and just have less of it. And that's way oversimplifying that thought. And
it's something I want too, and I think it's easy to romanticize, but it's also something that we have to lean into, and sometimes I think we need, when we just talked about this, we need to romanticize some of this in order to grow it a little bit. And I was thinking about it, even when I'm spending money, it feels different when it's in passion. I have another vegetable grower that we love around here, and she's a vegetarian, and I don't have much to I mean, we have some skills perhaps, but I don't have much to offer. And so I pay her. But that money is flowing into my local community, into somebody who is doing something with passion and with integrity. And that exchange based on currency still feels much different than buying she grows a lot of my chicories, than buying a head of radicchio at Whole Foods or wherever it is.
100%. Totally. Oh, I so agree. I really appreciate that you brought that up. My relationship with money has historically been one full of discomfort and shame and frustration. I'm learning to change the way I view money, and I've recently been really grateful for some wisdom around that, where instead of making it this evil thing or this source of contention or frustration, is to see it as opportunity. It's beautiful in the way that it connects and affords us opportunities, and it's always flowing. And
yes,
to appreciate it without attachment, I think, is what I'm going to land on with that one, because I still have not fully
I haven't either
and formed my new relationship with it, so I don't have a whole lot of wisdom around it, but I'm grateful for what it's
and I'm still working on that relationship, and actually one of the biggest things has been those exchanges where I'm like, oh, it feels good to give this money in exchange for this person's passion and hard work that I know, or that I know from a distance, right? Whatever that relationship is, but to have a connection there and to feel, oh, this money is flowing, it's in the current down the river to a good place.
You're right. I mean, those are the moments that have been super healing for me, is when I have been able to exchange money for somebody's passion, and I know what it means to them to be appreciated for the work they've done in that way. It has helped shift it on my end, so that when somebody wants to buy what I have to offer, I remember that feeling on the other end, and I try to embody that feeling and appreciate the fact that this is connecting me with my buyers. This is a connection. This is the way that they are thinking and showing gratitude for the work that I've done. It's allowing me to continue to do what I'm doing, and I'm beyond grateful and always in awe of the fact that I have the support that I do for the work that I do. I'm just, it's hard. It's actually it's a hard sort of gratitude to feel, because it's very humbling to feel supported in that way. And to get to do what I love to do is just like, gosh, it makes me teary-eyed, actually.
Watching you do one of my favorite things in the world, and I think we talked about this last night, is watching somebody be deeply in their element that is so good at what they do, and to watch their rhythm of work and to just be in awe and humbled myself. And I think that has been, I don't know how long I've been, watching you from Instagram, but just in awe of the way that you work and the reverence and the embodiment of your work, and of this deep sense of capableness that I learn from you. There's like you are teaching in the work that you are sharing, in just being yourself. And yeah.
Thank you. Those are hard things to respond to, as far as I'm touched. Thank you very much for saying that. I get to, I'm really grateful to live in a day and age where there are ways to share our skills and our work, share it. I mean, I'm sure there are ways, of course there are ways that want to, before technology, connect with so many people.
It really is, yeah.
About doing less better. See what I'm doing again. For a little while, like I'm myself. I want to be really good at all the things, and social media threaten that. Just being super honest right now, that there was a long time where I would feel kind of flustered when I would see somebody either doing what I was doing or doing something I wanted to learn how to do and doing it well. And that was a very, very immature way to interact with social media space. And it has been very healing, very freeing to come with a completely different perspective of like gratitude and awe and appreciation and inviting in knowledge, and also being okay with the fact that I'm probably never going to be great at a lot
growing
of things.
A vegetable for me.
A lot of things. But there are other people that like growing a vegetable, I'm just not going to be awesome at it. And to have the appreciation has made life so much richer, to be like, oh my gosh, what a joy to watch somebody do what their soul wants to do. It's like watching your sheep and your pigs out in the field, loving their life, and getting to watch other people love what they do is inspiring. Like, it motivates me. Sometimes I get on Instagram and I scroll through and I see people like sharing their passion and the joy that they're getting from what they're doing, and I'm like, heck yeah, I get to do that too with my work, and it feeds that fire for me. And I'm so grateful to have that different experience now, as I watch.
I agree in that evolution from that sort of that freeing view of scarcity that somebody's doing something similar into this
scarcity, totally
view of awe and of inspiration. And I really agree with that. Absolutely.
And there's enough for everybody. I mean, I think that's a really important thing, to make sure we sit with those thoughts and ask ourselves, like, why would I want to be the only person that did this? Or what would it give to me if I was the only person that could crank out this product? Do I want that? Do I want that many people knocking at my door asking? I would hate it. I would not enjoy my work anymore if it was all just about quantity. I love that I get to dial it back and focus on the quality and really pour myself into one piece at a time. What a joy. And there's enough of us in the world that each of us can do what we do well, and
yes,
there will be people looking for that product.
I love that. I love that outlook.
That skill.
I want to come back to something you said about sort of convenience, and I want to transition. I want to ask you a couple of questions about work, or I want to talk about work, because I'm just let me read this Lacey quote first. I think ease is important where necessary, but not convenience at the sacrifice of what adds depth, meaning, and satisfaction to our lives. And thus, I continue to enjoy the fact that I fall weary into bed most nights. And I think that kind of ties together what we were talking about, that there is so much there, and when we add depth and when we add meaning, whether it's in our monetary exchanges or whether it's within our social media environment. But one of the things that has captivated me in watching you is watching you build skills as you need them, as they are required. And I think in watching you build this home, there is this aspect of building capability right there in that moment. And I have we are as capable as we let ourselves believe we are, is another quote from you. And that really, I think it was the year before last, my word for the year was capable. And
that's awesome. I love the word. Like, so many there's nothing wrong with any of those other words. Like, you know, a lot of people pick like rooted or peace or whatever, but the idea of like choosing capability, it comes back to mindset. And when we hear ourselves say I can't in our head, even if it isn't those exact words, but just a resistance to something where we're like, oh, that's not for me, I can't do that. we've immediately decided, like we're giving that message to our entire body that we are not going to be able to do this. And the fear of trying just continues to grow. Set ourselves into that space to approach something more openly is hugely vulnerable, because that what if statement likes to show up and be like, what if you fail? And it isn't to avoid that possibility, because the likelihood that we will fail is there. The amount of times I have failed at the things that I have tried to do is way more than the times that I've succeeded. That's part of the process. We don't get to not fail at things in order to be good at them. You have to accept that as being part of it. And if we aren't in practice of that, again, it's very scary. It doesn't feel very good. Not only that, then we invite in criticism. We get the feedback from the outside that says, like, whatever it is that the outside world might say about it. And if we aren't prepared to hold ourselves safe in our failure, then those words are going to destroy us, whether they're the words from our own head or from the outside. So to go out there and say, I am capable. I just love that that was your word. I am capable doesn't necessarily even mean that you're going to succeed. It means that you are capable of trying, and then trying again, maybe, and maybe accepting that this is not for you, but it's a matter of putting yourself out there. And there have been a lot of skills and things that I have tried that I've decided, this is not for me, but I'm glad I tried. Because now I even have a deeper appreciation for people that do, and it is creating more juiciness in my world, because now I'm watching this person work. I know what it entails. I know how hard it was, and now I get to, like, especially if there's a monetary exchange.
Yes.
I get to be like, oh my gosh, you deserve this. And some, like, I am happy to give this to you because I know what you put into this. Please take my money.
I love that. I think failure, I think that's another aspect of having these thorns. I think failure are another, they're thorns that we have to welcome and embrace. They come with all of the juiciness and the goodness, and they are part of leading us to what will be and sitting in what is. We are just, and we talked about this last night. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and the more that I step out of my own comfort zone while knowing that I am home and that I create safety within myself, the more I fail and the more juice is here in life.
Yes. To be able to fail and to still accept yourself as whole and capable, even in those failures, is such a victory. And that takes courage. And I love the idea of courage. It's one of the quotes I say to myself often, and it's something that brought me through the hardest days of my life, and that's courage, dear heart. And it's this idea
I am too,
that your heart is precious, that you are precious, that you are dear. Have courage. I'm getting teary-eyed because it's so meaningful to me to talk to ourselves in that way. Because if we hold, like a mother, if we are our own mother in the way that we encourage ourselves like that, you've seen kids out, trying a new sport or learning how to ride a bike or whatever, and if there's someone behind them saying, like, you've got this, you can do this, you can try, the ratio of success is higher. The ratio of enjoyment is higher. The exuberance when you get it done and somebody else is there to celebrate with you. If you can be that for yourself, you can go, you bring yourself with you. You get to experience whatever it is you want to experience. If you've desperately wanted to try to do something, but you've always been afraid, if you can be your own cheerleader, if you can tell yourself, courage, dear heart, let's give it a shot. I think that,
I think cultivating that inner loving parent where you can be the voice of that inner loving parent that's providing courage and softness and gentleness and cheerleading and all of the things we need. I'm gonna internalize courage, dear heart. That meant a lot to me. I think that's, yeah.
Oh, good. I think that the season of having to be my own support, not to say that there hasn't been outside support, because I've had a lot of it, but this season of having to test my own wings on my own, it has given me something. Again, it's the thorn. It's a thorn of like experiences that felt very hard and shattering, and experiences where I sort of had to like pick up and rebuild life, start over. I wouldn't have wanted to do that. It was definitely the stem of thorns on this rose of life. But because of it, holy cow, I feel so much more seated in myself, so much more at home, so much more capable, so even more proud of myself. I'm just happy to be here in a way that I wasn't before. To be here, not, like in this moment right now, and not always in the future of like when this thing happens and when I have this and when the farm looks a certain way and my flock is just so, and my work is organized the way I want it, and instead just be here.
To be in the what is.
And happy with it.
And bring it back to that
gift.
Space. To be
I'm
in the
really
what
grateful
is. And I think that
for those thorns.
Yeah. I'm gonna read another Lacey quote. I just have all these gems, and that reminded me of this one, which I loved. Living in the dream is often like trying to see the forest in the trees. It requires a certain tenacity and perseverance because it is your dream. It can also be lonely at times. Living the dream has all these parts of it that aren't shown in photos. Living my dream requires me to follow the statement, "This is hard," with, "and I can do it." It also means putting down the hammer and nails and stopping to smell the roses, build a fire, and take note of how far I have come.
Yeah, again, I'm like just remembering how I felt in that moment. It was one of those moments where, and I'm sure that most people know this feeling of when you feel like you've been kind of wrung out, like there's not a whole lot left in you. But you're being wrung out because you're pursuing something that means a lot to you. So even though things are going wrong, or not even necessarily wrong, but just going in a direction you didn't mean it to go, or not in the format you had planned, but you're sticking with it, and you're adjusting, and you're holding on to it because it means something to you.
No, I love it. All right, this is the idiosyncrasies of just being in real life in a podcast. I like hearing the dogs bark and the cat meow and the train run by.
This is true. Good. Yeah, it is just part of life. Yeah, I remember being in that space of like almost wanting outside validation, actually. Like wanting somebody to tell me I was doing a good job, wanting somebody to validate all the effort that I was putting into this. And I was like, wait a second, this isn't for anybody else. This is for me. If my dream is just to authenticate and justify and to get validation, I'm never going to get there. That dream is always going to be the carrot dangling in front of you that you never get to take a bite of. Because you can never get enough validation to make your dream real from somebody else. It has to be yours. And you have to be doing what you're doing because you want it. And so I had to sit down. I remember I had to sit down and write that out, that the dream often is a lot messier and a lot harder than the picture of it in our head, but we have to remember that that is it. That's the dream. You don't get it, the dream, without this messy part. And to enjoy those messy parts of it too, to see how far you've come.
To pause and to see the journey, to be in that space of meandering.
Those are important parts.
And to not just be living in the hike, in the goal, which I love. My husband and I are big on meandering and not hiking. But I think, and to bring it back to this idea of, there's the dream of the sheep in the pasture, but there is also the reality and the hardness and the wonderfulness of building the fence in the moment to hold that dream.
That it's so true. I spent so many years trying to not skip, but just to get past the hard parts, the building, the fence building, the pulling the thistles out of the pasture, the planting the orchard so that I could sit under a tree someday and enjoy a piece of fruit from it. I pushed and pushed and pushed, and in a lot of ways to the detriment of the moment, to the people around me, to even to the land, in some ways. I think because I was so focused on the end goal, I wasn't spending enough time listening to what the land wanted to show me, what my animals wanted to teach me. I'm very much a bull in a china closet type, and I'm gonna just muscle my way through something. And a lot of times with animals, the biggest lessons are about putting your ego aside, watching how they interact with the environment, watching how they interact with one another, being quiet. I've had to learn a lot, especially recently, about being the observer and the student and not the master, because that's where the relationship is built.
I love
and
that.
That's where
This is something I was actually just having a conversation recently about what does it mean to sit and to listen to what the land wants to tell you, to what your animals are showing you, with so much genius of their own, and to not get lost in the whirlwind of our own noise, so that we can hear it. And I think it's the one more Lacey quote, and I think it really sums it up. I realized that I had come to terms with where I was finding my identity. So much of my identity is wrapped up in the doing and not the being, which is exhausting because you feel like it can be lost if you sit down too long. And I think it's just that, right? Because we connect so much in the being, and it is harder to find that connectivity and to listen when we're caught in the doing.
It's so true. It's so it's instant gratification in a lot of ways to connect with our doing, because we can just keep doing something to keep keep the admiration, to keep the accolades, to keep the title right in front, and we just have ourselves to sit with in front of us, like, oh, that's who I am. There's nothing out. It can be it can feel very lonely, it can feel very empty if we haven't, and I'm not saying it like I've figured this out, because I'm very truthfully just in the beginning stages of coming home to myself. But it's my goal currently. It's my ultimate goal outside of everything else is to be.
I love that.
Home.
Yeah, and you're building it. You're building it inside, and you're building a home, not the home, not the ultimate home, but you're building a home on the outside.
Which is, I'm so kind of tickled by how it's correlating, because I'm at this space in my life where home has been the ultimate goal for so long, like building the perfect home, like having the perfect space with the sun hitting just right, and the trees and the water and the animals where I can see them out my picture window, and having the flowers just so, and having a space for fires, and like there's been a very clear picture in my head for a very long time, and to finally be able to build my home, and so much of that vision is here. Like there's water, and there's trees, and there's space for flowers and community and beauty, and those things are not lessened, but they don't hold the same power that they used to for me. Those things are now like I'm internalizing those things, that safety, security, peace, beauty, whatever I was reaching for beforehand. It's not. I'm not going to find it out here. It's here, and what an awesome blessing to be able to build this home now. But if it goes away and I have to restart again,
So I
get to take it with me. And that's.
I know we're coming up on time,
Freeing.
which feels wild,
Very
because
freeing.
I don't think I've had a conversation just fly by in the way that this one has, in the way that it just, I felt totally lost in it in the best possible way.
Same. Thank you.
There's one
Thank
little
you.
thing
You've
that
been
I would be so remiss
so
if I didn't
wonderful to
ask, and
talk with.
it's not going to be a graceful
Appreciate it.
transition, but I want to talk about raising boys right now, and I think so much of what you've said about, in many ways, the ways that in which we raise ourselves and we become our own inner loving parent, but watching you raise boys, and I think the raising of boys in general just gives me a lot of heart here in this moment of time, and I don't know if you have any words about it.
Yeah, being a mother has been one of the most stretching experiences that I've been a part of. It wasn't necessarily, motherhood wasn't something that I thought about a lot as a kid. I wasn't like pining to start a family. It just kind of felt like a natural transition, and my body was up for the task. So it has in many ways made me feel very naked to who I am, because you have to be vulnerable with yourself if you want to raise the kind of, well, for me anyway, to raise the kind of people that I think will move well through the world, be responsible for themselves, and also that will be a benefit to society as a whole, requires me, and has required me, to be vulnerable and open with myself in ways that have been very scary and very hard. Learning how to quell my quick temper and control. Again, it's very similar to like raising animals, is observing, watching these people become who they are, allowing them to have their own opinions, their own experiences, and then learning how to communicate with them. That's been, I think, one of the best parts of this is I'm learning new ways to communicate And through it, I'm deepening my connection with them, and in hopes that this will allow them to deepen their connection and be able to communicate with the world. It's tricky, though. I'm not gonna lie. I every day is like, okay, all right, you got to just show up. Is I think one of the biggest things. And raising boys, that raising men, I call them my little men. Raising them to, I think, be responsible for themselves. That is like my number one thing, is I want them to know that they are, again, they're home. They are themselves. They get to take themselves wherever they go. And detaching myself from them, so experience, and in the same way, to go do whatever it is that they need to go do. And I have pushed myself to make sure they know I am not just mom. I do many things. I'm Lacey Jean, and I get to be their guide through this life, at least for these 18 years and however long. But I think in the same way that I approach my work and everything else, is that it's a little bit unstructured, or what maybe the world would see as being unstructured, and I'm okay with it, because I'm so proud of them. I think that they're really remarkable humans, and I can't believe I get to share some time with them and learn from them. Like, they're constantly teaching me, which is so humbling and so hard for me, to allow them to speak back into my just allowing them space to share their opinions with me, and their experiences and the way they see things is often, it gets my hackles up, because you kind of want to like keep them in the bowling alley lane that you see as being the right way to experience the world, or to view things, and to allow them to like share with me and have their own experience has been
I'm always interested in people who are able to
I'm
build,
so
and this word kept coming up too as I was looking at your work, this idea of sovereignty, and to raise sovereign humans means to come up. Yes.
Yes, to accept that they are their own. They're their own. I am my own. And it forces you to come up against yourself. And I know that other parents will be able to resonate with this feeling, that you feel a little bit like your identity is wrapped up in this person that you're raising. And it's very difficult to put ego aside and allow them to be themselves, most especially when it rubs up against what you think is the way they need to experience the world. And I'll touch on technology as being one of those things. Like, it has been a very difficult thing for me to figure out how to communicate with them about technology without having a bit of a negative bend on it. Because, and I recently realized in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like something else in my, like in my childhood, it might have been something else. It might have been CDs, or it might have been certain friends that I associated with. And as soon as it becomes this fixation, it's almost like as a child, you want to explore more of that, right? You're just kind of like, wait, why is this such a big deal? Why are we really hammering on this? And so I've been working a lot on not putting that much power in it, and kind of letting go a little bit, and letting them experience it, and also opening the conversation and being like, tell me about this, and not having world. Ooh, what do you find outside that's different? My hackles raised about it makes it so much easier. They're able to tell me without fear of what I'm going to say back.
No, I loved that, and I think that was a really important thing, because I think oftentimes I'm not a parent, but as I watch friends and family parent, I think there's this desire when we get into fear, and I know this just from being a kid of parents, that whatever it is that our parents are sort of creating this fear and sort of energy around, that you're naturally attracted into that space, as I think just a natural sort of antagonistic relationship and rebellious relationship between parent and child. And I think for those of us, I am very rebellious, and I value that. Like, I value rebellion. And so how do you hold that, and how do you maybe game the system a little bit in order to not create it around certain things?
So similarly, I sort of appreciate and admire people that push back, that swim against stream a little bit, that are a little bit rebellious, and yet I think that I appreciate it lines up with the things I feel rebellious about, right? And so when it's your own kid and you're like, wait a second, why are you pushing back about the food that I'm feeding you? Or why are you pushing back about the way that we view play and entertainment, you know? And I have to remember that rebellion and that being opinionated and being sovereign means that they're going to go do their own thing. You know, I only have so many years with them in my home, and regardless of what I make as being you know, the rules or off limits or whatever, they're going to go out into the world and do whatever it is that they want to do. I mean, I sure did as a kid, and there were many things that I'm sure gave my parents some headaches and gray hairs. But to let go of that and to okay, here's one of the big things, trust. I think that it's so important to instill trust in your kids and to start that voice that they will be and how they talk to themselves, like teaching them how to talk to themselves, how to trust themselves, how to trust their instincts, how to trust
to build their homes,
how to speak to themselves well, and a lot of to build their homes. And a lot of times our voice that we start out with in our adulthood comes from our parents. And so I've been learning that the voice and the way that I talk to them is ultimately going to fashion that voice in their head. And they can change it. You know, it takes practice. It takes work for us to change the voice. But I can at least give them a head start, hopefully, with that. And teach them how to ponder and hold fear without embodying it. Does that make sense? Like, to observe it, to look at something that you're afraid of, because I think that's one of our biggest obstacles in the world is fear. Even anger comes often from fear of what might happen to us. So if we can learn how to approach fear without letting it take us over, I don't know. I think that's just one of the main things that I'm trying to instill in them is how to move.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And we can wrap it up. Sorry, and I just want to repeat what you said, to hold fear without embodying it, because I think that that's a really important message for I mean, I know it is for me right now, and so I love it. let's wrap up. I don't want to
Me
leave
too.
without asking. I ask
It's
everyone the
a
same
huge
question at
one
the
for
end,
me, so
which is,
I
what does it
appreciate
mean
that.
for you to lay the groundwork?
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. What does it mean for me to lay the groundwork? I think I'm going to go back to what we were just talking about with the livestock and being an observer. And I think to lay the groundwork is to lay aside the ego and to be a student, a perpetual student, to learn from each other, to learn from the animals, to learn from the world around us, to be open to 1,000 deaths in ourselves, because it'll open us up and bring us to a new season, to allow the petals to fall and to decompose, to be okay with the thorns, to embrace the rose for all that
No,
it is.
don't be sorry. I loved that. I think that was
I got
perfect.
really sappy there. I'm sorry.
I love that. Last year I took all these pictures of these peonies in our yard that were perfect, right? They were at their full, like, gorgeous bloom. And peonies are always something I'm trying to hold fast to, but they last 7 days. They are here and then they are gone. And I wanted to take pictures again this year, but by the time I realized that dream, they were already falling. And I had this moment where I was like, I can still go and take pictures of the wilting and browning and decomposing petals. And that is a part of it too. And so I just love that you brought that in and that you brought Mary Oliver into that, and I'm just so grateful for this conversation. I don't often re-listen to my own podcast, but I'm going to go back and listen to this. It was just so full of wisdom. And
thank you. Oh, from you as well. I'm so grateful for the space that you've created for these conversations. I alluded to it a little bit in a message yesterday about how difficult it can be to find good conversationalists. To have a good back and forth banter and discussion is just meaty and rich, and I'm just so grateful for it. So thank you for such intelligent and heart-probing questions.
That means a lot. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So you're doing a fantastic job.